the second thing that I'd like to highlight is, once again, and this is something that's irking me a little bit on this Tuesday morning. There's two things irking me. First of all, you don't hear like the Steelers pull out this win and like, are the Steelers the most dominant team? The Lions pull out a win where they were absolutely dominated. And I think you need to continue to give the Lions flowers because, except for the Bucks in week 2 or 3, they've been beating everybody. But why doesn't anybody talk about the Vikings? The Vikings have the same record as the Steelers. The Vikings have a better defense than the Steelers, and the Steelers are known for their defense. But what's really irking me is that Kevin O'Connell's not showing up anywhere in Coach of the Year conversation. And I would argue that the win over the Jaguars proves once again that the Minnesota Vikings are the best coached team in the NFL right now. You're working with perhaps the weakest link quarterback in all the NFL right now.
And weakest links.
Yeah. and creating schemes where guys are open, creating schemes where, like, O'Connell is doing a very good job at working with a guy whose career was washed up. He's going to have this guy cash in on a big payday with somebody next year.
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin, I understand it's kind of a cool thing to have, like, oh, he's made a lot with 2 QBs. He actually hasn't. Like, people keep talking about, like, when you have 2 QBs, you have no QB. Mike Tomlin has never once had 2 QBs. He's always had 1 QB. And 1 QB got injured, and so he said Fields is the QB. And then he made a decisive moment of, like, now we're going back to Russ. And so there's never been, like, the media's made plenty of hash about it. And I understand maybe there's still kind of a cool thing with what he's done with the Steelers with these 2 QBs who people had kind of given up on. But I still argue that O'Connell deserves way more conversation. I would argue even more than Dan Campbell, as cool of a story as that is.
Right.
And as great of a job. But O'Connell, as far as pure coaching, like making the best of what you have, I don't see why he's not in the conversation.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think I would quibble. I don't know that if you're talking about weakest, depending on what you're meaning by weakest link, I would say that there are definitely worse quarterbacks playing right now. But as far as like in a chain that is strong enough to like go into, the playoffs, Darnold is probably the weakest link of any competitive teams.
Yeah, that's a good correction. I'm thinking, I don't think Darnold makes a team competitive. Like, I've never once thought going into this season, throughout the season, I've never once thought the Vikings are good because of Darnold. And I don't think you would do that for any team. Like, that's how low I am on Darnold.
Yeah. The Vikings are good because we have a team that is all, like, the players are all in, just team-wide, which is a coaching thing. We have, like, a defensive madman calling plays, and we have Jefferson, Hockenson, and Addison. Like, we have arguably one of the best receiving corps in the NFL, if not the best. But then the thing that makes that all work with Sam Darnold is, like, again, to your point, coaching.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say too, because a lot of people, like, I forget who I was watching, ESPN or somebody, is like, why is Darnold having the year that he is? And somebody said Justin Jefferson. I think that's naivety. You're not watching a lot of NFL. There are other QBs that are stinking right now that have incredible weapons. Like, I'm bothered by the fact that, like, Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the league, and we need to be getting him more targets. Jordan Addison if he was on almost any other team,
Yeah.
would be a number one wide receiver.
Yeah.
But there are lots of QBs who stink and have really good weapons around them. That I guess that's part of what I'm looking at is like that's an O'Connell thing. Like the fact that O'Connell is maximizing the weapons and he's elevating a mediocre, maybe even bottom 10 QB to play at a competitive level. Anyways, what were you going to say?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know the coach of the year thing. Like, I think Campbell should have been. I don't remember if he was in competition for it or not, but like, feels like last year would have been a better like coach of the year because this year they're just dominating, which is coaching. But I don't necessarily know that that's what gets you the coach of the year. I think coach of the year usually comes from people who have had who have played as the teams have played as well as they do in large part because of the coaching. Last year it was Kevin Stefanski um, with the Browns and their whole like 5 quarterback miss. With the Steelers, I mean, I do think Tomlin should be in the conversation, but yeah, like Kevin O'Connell hasn't been in the conversation since like week 4 or 5. Um, I remember hearing people talk about his name in that sense, but then we lost to two competitive teams and haven't heard it since. Um,
O'Connell, just to clarify, has O'Connell ever been in conversation outside of Minnesota sports? Because I'm not sure I've
I
ever heard
heard
him on.
Good Morning Football talked about it like one of the early
Oh, really?
weeks. Yeah.
I missed that.
Um, I I forget if it was a segment about it or if it was kind of leading up to them interviewing him because he went on Good Morning Football like week 3 or 4. Um,
Okay.
I think it was week maybe 4 or 5. And so I think they may have like bandied it about in that context. But
Hmm.
um but yeah, like I guess I don't really know what gets you coach of the year. Who won 2 years ago? I mean,
So
it was
Dable
oh yeah,
won
table.
when I would have argued O'Connell should have won as well. But
I, if yeah. I mean this so obviously this Vikings team hasn't have they haven't they haven't won a playoff game under Kevin O'Connell. But that's not what gets you coach of the year. That's not what I'm saying.
yeah,
Um but if like I think this team has always been underrated. Um I think in its history, but particularly under the O'Connell regime, because like just see the competitiveness with which they have played over the last 3 years versus the Giants, who were at the very most equals to the Vikings in 2022. And Daniel Jones just had the game of his career that got him a $40 million against the Vikings, and Kirk Cousins kind of blank screened at the end of the game. Um,
yeah, I would
but
say
then,
they
but
were
then,
not equals. But yeah,
yeah, but like that was their ceiling, wasn't equal to
yeah,
the Vikings.
yeah.
And their record wasn't equal that year either. Um, but then since then, the Giants have completely fallen apart, both subsequent years, and the Vikings have stayed steady and improved.
Even
Maybe
when
not in
they
record
had,
so far. Even when they had their MVP run quarterback have an Achilles, it,
yeah,
his Achilles.
with backup QBs, Kevin O'Connell played 500 ball.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess it would be interesting to go over and see like the last 10 coaches of the year and see like what the narrative was around those teams. But I don't know. I think
Yeah,
the Vikings are very happy historically to stay middle of the road. Um, and so I think it's a combination of being from flyover country, from being like a middle of the road team with with like some fairly famous implosions in like prime moments
Yeah.
that I think teams just, I mean, not teams, sports commentators just kind of forget about them. I don't think that like everybody who talks about Kevin O'Connell has respect for him when they
So
do talk about